The Compliance Perspectives podcast is sponsored by Case IQ, a global provider of whistleblowing case management and compliance solutions. Learn more at caseiq.com. Welcome to the Compliance Perspectives podcast. I'm Adam Chickletow from the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics in Healthcare Compliance Association. Joining us today from upstate New York is Chris Audet. Chris is Vice President and Chief of Research in the Gartner Assurance Practice. And today we're going to be talking about a survey they recently did relating to third-party risk. Chris, thanks for joining us, for doing the research. What led to it and what were you seeking to learn?
Adam, thank you as always for having me. This is an exciting topic. I love our research on third-party risk management. We have done it for many years now. And several years ago, I think we were among the first to say that, hey, you're really overspending your pennies when it comes to due diligence. And the real money is in monitoring for risk management. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And we published a number of findings there about kind of overestimating your efforts when it comes to due diligence, how to move those pennies over to monitoring. But we highlighted a key aspect of monitoring, which is that tech alone isn't going to get you to the risk management outcomes that you desire. It's actually your relationship owners, your third-party risk management vendor relationship owners that have an outsized role to play. And that's where we went deep on this research.
I'm glad you did, because one of the things that I think you rightly point out is we've relied upon screening, and yet there are people who are regularly dealing with these vendors and third parties that could have a good sense of what's going on. Now, you found something really interesting and alarming about red flags. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so to continue that thread of monitoring is the most important activity here when it comes to risk management, our relationship owners have this really unique vantage point into risk. And so we asked relationship owners in our survey about the list of risks or red flags that they observe. And we found out some interesting things. We saw 84% of them have at least a chance of a change that they've observed to the third-party risk profile. 83% of them observed a change to the third-party risk landscape. 82% a change in the third-party relationship. 76% the third parties providing materially inaccurate information. More than half, 54%, failing to implement mitigation. And then nearly half seeing a significant third-party risk event, corruption, or a privacy violation. Now, I just gave you 6 things. I did that very deliberately because it might be especially surprising that almost 40% of relationship owners saw at least one of those red flags in all 6 of those categories. It's a really high number that we just didn't expect. And if you wanted to take it a step further, 95% of relationship owners saw at least one of those 6 things across the last year. And that was a huge kind of bright light for us. And of course, the problem is, as we well know, is that they don't actually share these things. Compliance learns about risk too infrequently and too late. We see material third-party risks being a complete surprise. We could have identified them sooner. They could have been prevented. And so our relationship owners are seemingly kind of failing us when it comes to delivering against those risk management objectives. In fact, only about 1 in 5 compliance leaders is really satisfied with them. And that's because they don't share reliably the list of those 6 things that I mentioned earlier. In fact, just a little more than half kind of sharing those changes to the risk profile, to the risk landscape, to the scope of the relationship. And if it's just a little more than half, that's not going to help us meet our risk objectives.
So what's going on with the other half? I mean, it's great that they're able to spot the issues, but it's concerning that they didn't escalate. Why aren't they?
Yeah, we really wanted to get into, some behavioral science here. We wanted to learn a little bit more about what's behind this. And so we asked compliance leaders, hey, why don't you think relationship owners are sharing these risks with you? And they told us, frankly, they're not really sure. It was a mixed bag. A lot of kind of ideas there about it being maybe too much extra work on top of existing business workflows. Maybe some sense of we just don't know what to share. Relationship owners aren't sure what to share with us. Maybe some questioning whether or not relationship owners properly see the value in even doing that activity with us. So that gave us really not too much help, right? It kind of spread us pretty thin on what the cause might be. So naturally, we had to go to the relationship owners themselves. And that was our research question. How can the chief compliance officer increase relationship owner red flag sharing? And we learned about a number of factors, and particularly three factors that have the greatest impact on sharing. The first one is relationship owner objectivity, which is this belief that my main obligation is to my organization and not to my third party. The second one is this idea of red flag confidence. I know what the red flags are that matter to my organization. I know what they are. I know what matters, and I'm going to report them. And then the last one is this idea of sharing ROI, which is that sharing these red flags with compliance is worthy of time and effort. And in terms of what matters most, it's that last point, the sharing ROI, belief that sharing is worth my time and effort, that has the greatest impact. It had a max impact of 45% when we're able to actually improve sharing ROI within our businesses. If we go from back of the bus to front of the bus, when it comes to sharing, that's where we see an increase of 45% on the risk outcomes.
And that's a huge difference. So as you're saying this, I'm thinking, should we be focusing on further education about third-party risk, or do we instead need to focus on what to do when encountering a red flag?
Yeah, there's a lot here to tease out. And so I think there's kind of three imperatives. One, we have to make it easier, and sharing ROI is huge. That max impact that I shared is huge. So we have to make sure that the burden is low and that the value is very clear. And if those two things are not true, it's unlikely that relationship owners are going to act. So that's the thing we really need to focus on. We also have to give them some degree of confidence here. If they feel unsure in the moment that something is a red flag, they're just not going to share it. Why would I, disrupt things unless I thought it was necessary to do so? And third, this is really interesting and kind of gets to that behavioral science root that I mentioned earlier. It's this idea that we know third-party relationship owners are likely to kind of develop an affinity for the third party that they are the relationship owner for. And so we have to help them remain objective. And that's a difficult thing when they're developing these affinities, but we have to put compliance, help them to place compliance as first, and make it clear that compliance is not here to overreact in the event that you find something. We have to kind of socialize the right norms in advance so that the third party relationship owner knows what to share with us and that they can share what they find with us at any given time. That's the kind of behavior that we want to kind of inculcate within their own activity set, but we have to lead by example. We have to set up the right channels by which they can come to us, give them the right sorts of examples of what's an appropriate red flag. When we do all that, we start to bake it a little more clearly into the workflow, and that helps us ensure that we've already got kind of a mechanism by which we can disrupt any affinities that they might develop for the third party. That's really the way to maybe overcome it.
And it seems to me also a central issue here is trust, that, sort of trust that the compliance team will help and not hurt, and not undo that relationship which they have that's maybe close with a third party. So given that, I mean, am I right? Two is, how do we build that trust?
Yeah, I think trust is a big part of it. We heard from some compliance leaders, this is a difficult thing if the entire, bonus for that relationship owner is contingent on them maintaining that third party relationship. Of course, they're going to avoid coming forward to us in any way if there's something potentially disruptive in that environment. So it's really, as I mentioned in the last point there, we have to start sensitizing relationship owners early on to the idea that they might be biased, and that bias may even grow towards the vendor whose relationship you're maintaining here. We have to emphasize the importance of working with compliance over working with the third party, right? This idea of, you're on my team here. I'm going to give you the right tools and mechanisms so that you feel comfortable coming forward to me. I'm going to establish those channels and make sure that it's a regular part of our process, that you meet with me to share that information. And that is the way we do business here. That is how we do things here. If we don't create those norms around sharing, and it feels like it's an unsafe space or an unfamiliar place to come forward, then we're unlikely to hear from that relationship owner. We heard a lot of this and I know you and I have spoken about this too, Adam, our Speaking Up research a few years back. We have to make sure that we don't just say that we're not going to retaliate. We have to show that we're not retaliating for those that speak up against misconduct. We can't just say that the system is neutral and objective. We have to show them. Here's the metrics that we have around our investigations, for instance. Very similar thing here with third parties. We have to show them, not tell them, that this is something that's important to us, and we're going to carve out space for them to come to us with these issues, explain to them what it might look like, and expect that same behavior in return.
And I think it's funny. It goes back to that old adage: say what you mean what you say, always follow through. And that is really something that remains relevant here, just as it does in so many other places. Well, Chris, thank you so much for doing the research and sharing the results of it with us today. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen. I'm Adam Turteltaub from SCCE and HCCA. I hope we're able to expand your compliance perspective.